Welcome back to episode 3 of Community Spotlight for November 2022. Let's get into it. Today I have with me Reap, Paperboat Hat, and my good friend Tree of Smoke. Gentlemen, welcome to the Spotlight, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So Reap, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
So yeah, I am Reap, a map modder for Radio Not. And as you can tell, I have a bit of an accent. I'm from the Netherlands, Rotterdam. My background professionally is in software development. I'm currently employed as an automation engineer in industrial environments, ranging from the petrochemical industry to the production of medicines. And for my background in modding, we have to go way back to the old Half-Life games, starting from the first Counter-Strike. I have always been just as interested in how I can mess around with a game and how it works as actually playing the game. So I think my first steps in modding were actually altering the textures on the player models to bright neon colors so I can easily spot enemies. Yeah, I was that guy. Um, but most of my experience was gained in a Half-Life 2 mod called Resistance and Liberation, a mod set in the Second World War. For this mod, I have done almost everything from simply upscaling the textures to modding in new self-modeled weapons, along with their own custom audio and animations, and of course a bunch of custom maps. Besides that, we also ran our own servers, for which I scripted in a few admin tools. Later on, I moved to the Arma 2 and Arma 3 games, where I was also doing texture work as well as making missions. They have their own in-game mission editor. So yeah, here we are at Ready or Not this time, where I have focused on the mapping bit and more specifically in blueprints, which are basically the technical stuff in the background to really link up with my professional background. And the maps that I have published have been tributes to that modding origins, as I have ported CS Office and DE Nuke from the Counter-Strike franchise.
What are you working on for your upcoming project?
I've mostly worked on the blueprints and the more technical scripts in the background. On Coastline, we will try to use more experimental stuff to introduce some new element to the players.
So when did you first get started into working with Unreal Engine and blueprints and scripting and stuff?
I have basically always been interested in modding games, so all the way from the earliest Counter-Strike games and even some various Half-Life 2 mods. I've been modeling, texturing, mapping, some scripting. I never really bothered that much with Unreal Engine. I did some more texture work and mission making in Arma 2 and 3, but I only dabbled the Unreal Engine a few times before Ready or Not.
Okay, can you give us a little insight into some of the custom things that you're doing for this map?
I will be focusing on the blueprints for the map, and for those that have no clue what that means, the blueprints is basically the technical logic behind the scenes, so the scripts and everything.
Excellent. And what new challenges are you facing with this map you're making now?
The real challenge is that it's going to be released as part of Zev's or Paperboat Hat's atmosphere. So there's some standard attached to it because people really love Lustful Remorse. So it has to hold up, basically.
So you find that it's the expectation that's going to be the heaviest burden on you.
Oh yeah, for sure. On my own maps, I worked on Nuke and Office. Those were just sports and some unreleased maps. But yeah, in unreleased maps, it doesn't really matter that the logic is kind of janky. But people have some expectations for the conclusion to Lustful Remorse. So whatever new logic is in there, it has to hold up as well.
Okay, can you give us a little insight into some of the custom things that you're doing for this map?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we are trying to introduce some new elements to the game without going too far from the base game, going too far from the core of Ready or Not. So we don't really want to hinder new players or introduce new mechanics that people have never seen, but we do want to spice it up a little bit. So one of the new elements will be a pre-planning phase, where players can spread out over multiple spawn locations and make some tactical decisions early on. For instance, I don't know. There's still some internal discussion going on about what exactly to add, but we are considering having an informer sabotage the ventilation system, so you can deploy your grenades from the roof into the building, or disable the lock of the garage door for an easier bottom-up entry. But there might be more to come.
Excellent. Sounds exciting. I heard you were also working on some kind of UI interface as well to go along with it.
Yes, in the pre-planning phase, it's completely in the UI, so it won't be some weird system with buttons floating around or anything. It's just going to be a UI for every player, where they can select their spawn and the assets they want to unlock.
What are some of the technical challenges of implementing this stuff? I know that you don't have an SDK released or anything like that, and you have to use some sort of workarounds. How's that going?
Yeah, the lack of the SDK is really hampering this a bit. So we are trying to work around it. We have already, together with Rare Kiwi, there's also in the mapping Discord, we have developed our own parallel interaction system, which we will be using in this map as well. So just stuff like that. We have to work around not having an SDK. That's really making stuff challenging. The real challenge has been to figure out how to do stuff efficiently without an SDK. So just from going for the most simple solution of, well, it's going to be a little bit technical, sorry, but just having a what is handled client side and what is handled on the server. So yeah, running into that and overcoming that as kind of a newbie to Unreal Engine.
With your first iteration, how did that work out?
It is kind of grandfathered in from the experimental stuff I was doing on my own Unreleased Maps. In there, I spawn everyone inside of a box, and they basically get a whiteboard with a map on it with some buttons, and then if you press that, the whole team gets transported or teleported. But on Coastline, we wanted to make everyone able to select his own spawn position. Using that button system wasn't really fun or engaging, so we were trying to make an UI work, but we were running into issues with multiplayer. So just figuring out what is client side, what is server side, and how to make everyone spawn at their own position that they have actually selected. That was pretty hard. But right now we got a prototype of it, which we will be refining.
How many hours would you say you've put into this project so far?
Oh, I don't know. It's really hard to say. A lot of it is also from just experimenting on my own maps that I never released. So yeah, if I count that it's going to be a lot of hours. I have no clue how many hours. It's probably probably too much I want to share.
And what maps have you released?
Right. So for my first ventures into modding, I had some ideas that relied on too many assets, and then also ran into the issue with the Radio Not AI being absolute snipers, even with handguns. So I wanted to narrow it down, and so I ended up working on a mention from Hitman. I never released that because for some reason the game doesn't have much assets for a Baroque interior. And to get around that issue of not having the assets, I focused on porting maps from games that I loved, and I turned to Counter-Strike. So right now on Nexus, I have CS Office. It's a bit rough. Apparently, they never bothered to update it in between the Counter-Strike iterations. So when I ported it from CSGO, it just doesn't feel right. The dimensions are all off. It's fun to play, but I cannot put doors in there because all the doorways are different sizes. However, Nuke has been updated, and that was a map I really enjoyed a lot as well. So that one is also on Mathew, besides Nexus. So yeah, those two run versions of CSGO, Nuke, and Office, of which Office is only on Nexus.
Yeah, it's nice to put the faces to the maps. How do you feel about Unreal Engine? Are you comfortable with it? Or did you start out from using maybe BSP stuff before, or any kind of background there?
Yeah, so I started modding way back in when you still had to use Hammer Editor. I don't know if you've any experience with it, but it was pretty horrible. It was basically BSPs, but completely geometric, so everything was a square. So just moving from that to Unreal, well, I messed around with Arma and stuff, but it has an in-game mission editor, so that doesn't really count. But in Unreal Engine, just the BSPs work a lot better than what I was used to in Hammer Editor, because they combine into one geometry and then just be completely smoothless, or whatever it's called.
You don't have to worry about leaks.
Yeah. Yeah,
binary space partitioning systems are always horrible for that. I used to just make a giant box and then I'd build my level in that, so I didn't have to worry about leaks.
Yeah, just make one big square in the bottom to have your floor, and then build on top of that, and the game will fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for the scripting, the whole deal with Unreal Engine is that it has the blueprints, which is basically a visual scripting language, and it really helps to speed things up. I'm a software engineer by profession, so I am completely familiar with the code behind it, but just dragging a square into it to make that replaces a few lines of code, it just makes things very much faster. While still it has the ability to inject your own custom code if what you need isn't there. So that really helps, and it's really fun to use as well.
Often do you find yourself relying on the stuff that's already there opposed to creating your own custom stuff? I know you're familiar with creating your own.
Yeah, it's much faster to just use their stuff. Basically everything that you would need is already there, and then the last few very specific things you can inject yourself. Yeah, so on my unreleased maps, I did some experimenting with the blueprints mostly. I just wanted to become familiar with Unreal Engine, basically. So yeah, that's what is on those unreleased maps. So on Hitman, I discovered the breakable objects functionality, and I just went wild with it. Like every window on that map was completely breakable. And it ruined your FPS, but it was really fun to play in. That also led to some stuff that is actually on Lustful Remorse in the basement in the boiler tanks. If you shoot them, there will be a particle system with the steam coming out, and it is also from the experiments. But not everything made it to a map, obviously. I made some custom ladders, custom AI patrols. I even made a tower defense, which was not very productive, but it was fun to play.
How on earth do you do a tower defense in this with Ready or Not? Wow.
Well, it's basically just building a new game within Ready or Not. I just use Ready or Not for the whole player mechanics and the gun system, and then I make my own AI for the tower defense. And that's also what led to zombie mode. I just want to tell you what I run into with Ready or Not is that you mentioned it in the intro video as well, or in one of your earlier videos. At some point, you just you get so much hours in the maps that are available that you just want something new. And it's something that I ran into with Door Kickers 2. The campaign is great, but once you've played it, you don't want to replay it over and over again. And at some point, they introduced a random map generator. And yeah, I still just launch the game every now and then. And that's what I envisioned for Ready or Not as well. So I experimented with a random map generator that just completely builds a new map every time that you run the level. But that didn't work. Like, it would generate rooms that were closed, they had no doors to it and everything. So that wasn't fun. And then another idea to just launch the game every now and then and shoot a few people and be done with it was an idea of a King of the Hill, basically. But what I ran into with that is that in the game, once the game runs, during the mission, you cannot spawn in new AI. So I could not kill 5 guys and then have 5 new guys spawn in. So I had to make my own AI to do that, basically. And at that point, I was like, okay, let's just go all the way. And I made a zombie mode based on Call of Duty. Like, the core gameplay is pretty solid in my testing, but just getting there took so much energy that I want to give that a little rest for a while. And I need maps to go with it, of course. I cannot just release zombie mode in where you stand in a circle and hope for the best. So yeah, it needs some more work, but the core gameplay of the zombie mode is there. Some other experimenting that we did was, at some point we found out where loading screens are. So when you load a map or start a mission, the game will spawn in 2 loading scenes. The first 5 seconds you are standing there posing in front of a black screen, and the second and the last 5 seconds you are sitting in your barricade. And I found out that is loaded into your own mission. And then, well, the race was on, of course, to find out where that was. And at some point, we had a suspect hold you hostage in the first 5 seconds, and then a girl from the club would sit in the Bearcat, cheering you on.
In the loading screen of your game.
Yeah, while you were loading your own mission. Yeah, so that was really funny to find out. And then from there, we got the idea to make a briefing scene or a briefing. So from that point, we just wanted to do a briefing phase into those two scenes. But then Zeph just found out that you could also just use a widget and just put that over the player screen. So that was much easier. But it was pretty funny to spawn in random objects in the Bearcat.
Yeah, speaking of which, like originally, because like when we found out about the location of the Bearcat, the initial experimentation was, oh, that also means that we can put stuff outside of the windows of the Bearcat, like if we were actually driving down the street. Um, and just to make a small tangent to Lostful, the original loading screen before the briefing was taking place was supposed to be just like a street and lights kind of rolling by. But I figured that with the amount of time that I was already spending on the map, I didn't want to overcomplicate things for like a 10-second screen. So instead I said, you know what, we've seen the loading screen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times playing the map. We don't need to see it again. And I figured out about the widget system because before, when we were thinking about how to create something new, the original idea was that you would put a black plane in front of where the camera was so that you could block all the elements behind it. But I figured that, like, well, why not just use a widget and use a black border or a black image that scales to the screen? That way, you don't actually have to physically render a 3D object and light it and everything. It's just a consistent black box, and you can put whatever you want in front of it. But yeah, that was the early discovery of that. We could expand on the loading screen. I know that Arrow, for his SWAT 4 maps, he decided to go for the more traditional SWAT 4 loading screen with the images and the text, and the loading bar and stuff. And Vegriv, he took the same idea and he did his own little camera intro for Shifter Exposition. So just having that discovery and kind of opening the floodgates for custom loading screens has been quite nice to see the community play around with.
Reap, are you planning on using any of that with your design UI for the spawning system?
Yeah, definitely. So during that loading phase, we plan to have the UI for the spawning already visible, so you can already make your selection and select the assets that you want to bring. Maybe we have some actual extra briefing in there, but yeah, that possibility, it has been since we discovered that the loading scene is actually inside of your map already. We can do whatever we want during loading, so we will definitely use it. Along the way, we also found out that we could use in-game blueprints just by referencing them as empty blueprints in the editor. But then, if you don't cook them, you are gonna use the original blueprints. One of the blueprints we found was a Bearcat that was actually drivable. So I loaded that up in my test map, and what I found out is that if you enter the Bearcat, and you can start driving around, but it will detect your SWAT character as no longer controlled by a player, so it is dead, and it just ends the mission. But it's pretty fun to see that they have a drivable Bearcat actually in the game.
Cool. Is there any plans to have PvP available options? Maybe a button you can click so that no enemies spawn on the map?
Not as of now, and to be honest, the map isn't really developed for that, but it is definitely an option because now we have that possibility to basically influence the map before you actually spawn in. So it did open the floodgates, like Paperboat Hat, but yeah, it's an option. We don't plan it for Coastline in particular, but yeah, it's there for people to use. To add to that, just the fact that we don't have an SDK and that we find out that basically anything goes, it just opens up so much. You can just come across some new stuff that somehow works actually in the game, and it isn't being shut down by the game. So just the lack of SDK and the fact that everything goes opens up so much opportunities to go wild with your own custom stuff.
I imagine that's very motivating to find out that like the doors are wide open, even though you don't have the resources of the SDK.
Yeah, like the moment that we found out that the loading screens were in the mission, so your mission was already running. It was such a boost to the entire community. Everyone embraced it right away. So just those little things, it just showcases that you can do whatever you want basically. But that does come with its downsides. So you don't want to go too far from the core gameplay of Ready or Not, because then you're just going to put up barriers for players that you can just make a new trap or something, but people will not know that trap. So they can just run into a new trap and then be killed and be like, well, that was BS. How could I have known that? And that is really something that you have to consider during this experimenting. You can push the boundary all you want, but it has to still be fun for players and intuitive, so it doesn't scare them off. Okay. Yeah, so everything we come up with or we encounter along the way by accident, we just throw it in the Discord and then it's open for everyone to use. We also have a help channel, so if someone finds a video or a screenshot of us discovering something new and they were like, okay, but can you explain please how I use it? Yeah, just hop in that channel and then we're glad to help.
Excellent. With that, I would like to thank my guests for coming. Tree of Smoke, Paperboat Hat, and Reap. Gentlemen, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was definitely fun.
That was episode 3 of Community Spotlight for November 2022. Stay tuned for episode 4, where we talk to 2 of the founders of the community, Vagriv and Tor, and get some insight into the history of Unreleased Maps Discord. See you there.